History teaches us that wealth brings power. But what happens when one man possesses so much gold that his generosity becomes an economic weapon? What happens when charity destroys economies? This is the story of Mansa Musa, the 14th century West African emperor who was so incomprehensibly wealthy that he accidentally crashed entire economies just by being generous. A man whose pilgrimage to Mecca was so lavish that it triggered a recession lasting 12 years. A ruler so rich that modern historians struggle to even calculate his net worth. Estimates range from 400 billion to over 600 billion in today's currency, making Jeff Bezos look like he's working minimum wage. But here's what makes his story extraordinary. Mansa Musa didn't conquer his way to wealth through blood-soaked battlefields like Genghis Khan. He didn't inherit a merchant empire like the Medici. He transformed an already prosperous kingdom into the wealthiest empire the medieval world had ever seen by controlling something the entire world desperately needed: gold. At the height of his power, the Mali Empire produced nearly half of the world's gold supply. This isn't just a story about obscene wealth. This is about a man whose very existence challenged medieval Europe's understanding of Africa, rewrote the maps of the known world, and proved that economic power could be just as devastating as military might. How does a relatively unknown king from West Africa become so wealthy that his name echoes through 7 centuries of history? How does one man's generosity cause international financial chaos? And why did the effects of a single journey ripple across 3 continents for over a decade? Picture the world in 1324. Medieval Europe is still recovering from devastating famines. The Mongol Empire dominates Asia. The Islamic world thrives as the center of science, mathematics, and trade. And in West Africa, the Mali Empire stretches across an area larger than Western Europe, a sophisticated civilization that European scholars barely knew existed. This is the golden age of trans-Saharan trade. Caravans of thousands of camels cross the brutal Sahara Desert, carrying salt, ivory, and slaves northward. But the most precious commodity flowing from West Africa is gold, the lifeblood of medieval economies, the foundation of currency, the symbol of divine power. Every kingdom, caliphate, and empire desperately needs gold, and Mansa Musa controls the source. Medieval Mali isn't the primitive society European chroniclers imagined. Timbuktu stands as a gleaming center of Islamic scholarship, its libraries containing hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. Jennah's Great Mosque showcases architectural brilliance. The empire's administrative systems rival anything in Europe. This is a civilization at its peak, and Musa sits at its summit, inheriting a throne built on centuries of accumulated wealth and strategic brilliance. But wealth means nothing without legacy. As a devout Muslim ruling over an empire of millions, Mansa Musa faces a sacred obligation: the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca that every capable Muslim must undertake. Most kings would travel modestly, focusing on spiritual devotion. Mansa Musa has different plans. He's about to transform a religious duty into the most extravagant display of wealth the medieval world has ever witnessed. A journey so spectacular that it will literally bend the rules of economics and permanently alter how the world views Africa. What happens when unlimited wealth meets unlimited ambition? We're about to find out. Musa's path to the throne begins not with destiny, but with mystery and intrigue. Born around 1280 into Mali's ruling Keita dynasty, he never expected to wear the crown. His predecessor, Mansa Abu Bakr II, was obsessed with a different kind of conquest. Not land, but knowledge. Abu Bakr became consumed with a question that haunted him. What lay beyond the Atlantic Ocean's western horizon? In 1311, Abu Bakr assembled a massive fleet. Accounts speak of 2,000 vessels, filled with provisions, soldiers, and his burning curiosity. He appointed Musa as deputy ruler and sailed into the Atlantic. chasing the edge of the known world. He never returned. Ships vanished into the vast ocean, swallowed by waves or wrecked on unknown shores. Some historians speculate he might have reached the Americas nearly 2 centuries before Columbus, but the truth died with him in those dark waters. Musa inherits an empire at its zenith, but also one in mourning. The question hanging over his coronation is brutal. Can he match his predecessor's ambition without repeating his fatal mistake? Musa makes a calculated choice. He'll direct Mali's ambition inward, consolidating power, expanding trade networks, and transforming economic strength into unassailable political authority. But first, understand what Musa actually controls. The Mali Empire's wealth rests on 3 pillars, each one strategically positioned in his grasp. First, the goldfields of Bambouk and Bour, regions along the Senegal and Niger rivers, where gold lies so abundant that river sediment glitters in sunlight. Mining operations employ thousands, using sophisticated techniques passed down through generations. The gold flows directly to Musa's treasury, not all of it, but enough that even a fraction makes him unimaginably wealthy. Second, the salt gold trade, perhaps the most profitable exchange in medieval economics. In the Sahara's northern reaches, Tagaza's salt mines produce slabs of salt so valuable that they're literally cut into uniform blocks and used as currency. Musa controls both ends of this equation, the salt coming south and the gold flowing north, taking a cut from every transaction. Imagine controlling both oil production and the currency used to buy it. Third, strategic positioning. Mali sits at the crossroads of trans-Saharan trade routes connecting sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean world, the Islamic caliphates, and beyond. Every caravan passing through pays tribute. Every merchant trading in Mali's cities enriches the imperial treasury. Musa doesn't just collect taxes. He shapes the flow of commerce itself. Yet wealth alone doesn't guarantee stability. Medieval empires rise and fall with brutal regularity, torn apart by ambitious generals, rebellious provinces, or neighboring kingdoms sensing weakness. Musa faces immediate challenges from nobles who question his legitimacy. After all, he took the throne not through primogeniture, but through his predecessor's disappearance. Musa demonstrates the strategic brilliance that will define his reign. Rather than rule through fear and military might alone, he employs something more sophisticated: the redistribution of wealth as political capital. He showers loyal nobles with gold, funds the expansion of mosques and madrasas, sponsors scholars and artists, and ensures that Mali's prosperity becomes synonymous with his name. He also expands Mali's borders, not through costly wars of conquest, but through strategic annexation and diplomacy, backed by overwhelming economic leverage. When the wealthy trading city of Gao resists incorporation into the empire, Musa doesn't send armies first. He sends merchants, cutting off trade routes and strangling the city's economy until submission becomes preferable to isolation. When Gao finally capitulates around 1325, it's not because of military defeat, but economic checkmate. This is power in its purest form, the ability to achieve objectives without bloodshed, because the alternative to cooperation is economic annihilation. Musa understands what future economists will take centuries to fully articulate. Money isn't just a medium of exchange. It's a weapon, a political tool, and a means of control far more elegant than swords. But something gnaws at Musa, despite his successes. He rules millions. His treasury overflows with gold. His empire expands. Yet by Islamic law and personal devotion, he has an unfulfilled obligation: the Hajj to Mecca. For most Muslims, this pilgrimage represents a profound spiritual journey undertaken with humility and simplicity. For a king of Musa's stature, it poses a complex question. How does the wealthiest man in the world undertake a journey meant to demonstrate humility before God? Musa's answer reveals everything about his character. He won't travel humbly, disguising his wealth. He won't make the journey quietly, unknown to the world. Instead, he'll transform the Hajj into a statement, a demonstration of Mali's power, his personal piety, and Africa's sophistication that will force the entire Islamic world to acknowledge what European Christians stubbornly deny, that civilization, learning and wealth flourish south of the Sahara. In 1324, Musa begins preparations for a journey that will take him across 4,000 miles of desert, mountains, and foreign kingdoms. He's not just planning a pilgrimage. He's orchestrating the greatest traveling exhibition of wealth in human history. And he has absolutely no idea that his generosity is about to trigger an international economic crisis. The entourage that departs from Niani, Mali's capital, in 1324 defies comprehension. Contemporary Arab historians who actually witnessed this spectacle struggle to describe it adequately. Let's break down what they recorded. 60,000 people. Think about that number. 60,000 men marching in coordinated formation, more than many medieval European cities' entire populations. This isn't an army, though 12,000 are slaves dressed in Persian silk, carrying golden staffs. These are attendants, officials, merchants, scholars, doctors, teachers, and holy men, all part of Musa's traveling court. The caravan stretches for miles, 80 to 100 camels, each carrying 300 pounds of gold dust. That's somewhere between 12 and 15 tons of pure gold just in the camel train. Do the math. At today's prices, that's over $700 million in gold alone. And that's not counting what Musa himself carries, or the treasuries of his officials. Musa rides at the center, surrounded by an honor guard carrying golden staffs. His wife and court ladies travel in luxurious litters. Heralds go before him announcing his arrival. This isn't a pilgrimage, it's a moving nation, a traveling exhibition of imperial might, dressed in the garments of religious devotion. The first stop, Cairo, the jewel of the Islamic world, capital of the Mamluk Sultanate, and one of medieval Earth's largest, most sophisticated cities. Cairo has seen wealth before: sultans, caliphs, merchants laden with Silk Road treasures. Nothing prepares them for Mansa Musa. Picture yourself as a Cairo merchant in July 1324. You hear rumors of an African king's approach. You've seen wealthy pilgrims before, so you're skeptical. Then the caravan arrives. For 3 months, Musa stays in Cairo. And what happens next will be studied by economists 7 centuries later. Musa spends extravagantly, but more importantly, he gives gold away. Not carefully measured charity, wholesale distribution. He hands fistfuls of gold to scholars, beggars, officials, merchants, and random people on the street. He purchases supplies, paying many times over market value and refusing change. He commissions buildings, sponsors students, funds mosque expansions. He makes loans to Cairo's merchants, who suddenly find themselves with access to more capital than they've ever seen. Al-Umari, a Syrian historian writing just 12 years after Musa's visit, records the aftermath. Gold in Egypt lost its value. Think about what that means. Gold, the foundation of medieval currency, the standard of value, the most stable commodity in the pre-modern economy, suddenly becomes so common that its worth plummets. Merchants who traded in gold futures watch their fortunes evaporate. The Egyptian dinar, backed by gold, suffers massive inflation. The rate of gold dinars drops so low that it takes 12 years for Cairo's economy to fully recover. 12 years. One man's generosity triggered a recession lasting over a decade in one of the world's most important economic centers. But here's what makes this truly remarkable. Musa apparently didn't understand what he was doing. He's operating on a different economic scale, where gold is so abundant in his kingdom that its scarcity value never registered. When Egyptian officials politely explain that he's destroying their economy, Musa is genuinely surprised. In one of history's most peculiar economic interventions, he attempts damage control by borrowing gold from Egyptian moneylenders at high interest rates, taking gold out of circulation to stabilize the currency. The pattern repeats across Musa's route. In Medina, in Mecca, in every city he visits, the same economic disruption unfolds. Markets flood with gold. Prices skyrocket as merchants realize this African king will pay any amount, then collapse as the gold oversupply destroys value. Contemporary accounts describe the pilgrimage itself. Musa completes the Hajj rituals with genuine devotion, praying at sacred sites, circling the Kaaba, performing the required ceremonies. But even his spiritual journey becomes legendary. He allegedly gives away so much in Mecca that the holy city's economy staggers under the weight of his charity. Muslim scholars flock to him, recognizing both his wealth and his genuine interest in Islamic learning. Musa recruits them aggressively, offering salaries that ensure the empire's best minds will return with him to Mali. Among them is Es-Saheli, a renowned Andalusian architect and poet, who Musa personally persuades with promises of unlimited resources to build magnificent structures. The return journey sees Musa transformed. He's no longer just Mali's emperor. He's now an international figure whose wealth and generosity have become legendary across the Islamic world. But he's also become more strategic, more careful about his distributions, having learned harsh lessons about the destructive potential of unlimited largesse. Musa returns to Mali in 1325, bringing with him scholars, architects, books, and ideas. Now comes his greatest achievement: transforming economic power into lasting cultural and intellectual legacy. Es-Saheli begins constructing buildings that blend Andalusian architectural sophistication with West African styles. The Jingwariber Mosque in Timbuktu, completed around 1327, stands as a masterpiece, its distinctive pyramidal minarets and adobe construction creating a uniquely Malian aesthetic that still captivates viewers today. But it's more than beautiful. It's functional, housing scholars and serving as the anchor for Timbuktu's expansion into West Africa's intellectual capital. Musa pours resources into education with the same extravagance he showed in Cairo. He establishes madrasas, funds libraries, and creates scholarship programs. Timbuktu transforms from a trading outpost into an intellectual powerhouse, hosting thousands of students from across Africa and the Middle East. The University of Sankore becomes renowned for astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and Islamic jurisprudence. Manuscripts produced in Timbuktu during Musa's reign and after number in the hundreds of thousands, covering everything from algebra to zoology. This is strategic brilliance disguised as cultural patronage. Musa understands that economic power fades, gold mines deplete, trade routes shift, empires fall. But intellectual capital, cultural influence, and educational infrastructure create lasting legacy. He's investing his wealth in Mali's future relevance, ensuring that even after his death, the empire will remain significant, not just economically, but culturally and intellectually. But Musa hasn't forgotten the practical requirements of maintaining power. His Hajj achieved multiple objectives simultaneously, demonstrating Mali's wealth and sophistication to the Islamic world, establishing diplomatic connections with powerful sultanates, recruiting talent, and, perhaps most importantly, cementing his legitimacy as Mali's emperor through spectacular display. Upon return, he faces no serious challenges to his authority. How could anyone rebel against a king who just awed the entire known world? Nobles who might have grumbled about his authority now bask in reflected glory. Mali's prestige has never been higher. Musa expands the empire methodically. He brings the 24 cities of Timbuktu's region under direct imperial control. He extends Mali's influence over the lucrative salt-producing regions. He strengthens administrative systems, appointing loyal governors to distant provinces and ensuring that gold continues flowing toward the imperial treasury. The empire at its height under Musa stretches from the Atlantic Ocean to modern-day Niger, from the salt mines of Tagaza in the Sahara to the gold fields near modern-day Ghana. It's a territory larger than Western Europe, containing diverse peoples, languages, and cultures all held together by economic prosperity, efficient administration, and Musa's increasingly legendary status. But Musa's most profound impact manifests far beyond Mali's borders. His Hajj forced medieval cartographers to acknowledge what they'd long denied: African civilization's sophistication and wealth. In 1375, a Spanish cartographer named Abraham Cresques completes the Catalan Atlas, one of medieval Europe's most important maps. There, in the center of the African continent, sits Mansa Musa, crowned, holding a gold nugget the size of an apple. The caption describes him as the richest and most noble king in all the land. This isn't abstract recognition. This is European acknowledgement, by one of their most respected cartographers, that an African Muslim king represents pinnacle wealth and power. For context, understand what this means. Medieval European Christians viewed Africa primarily through biblical and classical lenses, as exotic, mysterious, and primitive. The idea that sophisticated empires with intellectual achievements rivaling Europe's existed south of the Sahara contradicted their worldview. Musa's Hajj made denial impossible. Too many respected Arab historians recorded his journey. Too many merchants returned with tales of Mali's gold. Too many scholars spoke of Timbuktu's libraries. Suddenly, European merchants want access to Mali's gold. Diplomats seek audiences. The economic balance of power has shifted, and Europe realizes it needs Africa's resources, not as conquered territory, but as trading partner. Musa has achieved what military conquest never could: forced recognition of Mali's importance through sheer economic reality. But here's what historians often overlook in celebrating Musa's achievements: the human cost hidden beneath. The golden veneer, those 12,000 slaves carrying golden staffs through Cairo, their people, prisoners of war, debtors, victims of Mali's expansion. The Mali Empire's wealth rests partly on slave labor in the gold fields and salt mines. Trans-Saharan trade routes, which enriched Musa's treasury, trafficked in human beings alongside gold and salt. Some estimates suggest Mali exported thousands of slaves annually to North Africa and the Middle East. This creates profound moral complexity. Musa is remembered for generosity, for building mosques and madrasas, for spreading learning and culture. He's also the ruler of an empire sustained by slavery. He performed the Hajj with spectacular devotion, while his wealth derived partly from traffic in human souls. There's no reconciling this contradiction, only acknowledging it. Medieval Islamic slavery differed somewhat from Atlantic chattel slavery. Slaves could own property, earn freedom, and rise to positions of power. But suffering remained suffering. The humans marching in Musa's caravan included people stolen from their homes, separated from families, forced into labor that enriched an empire while breaking their bodies. There's another, subtler price to Musa's wealth. By making Mali's prosperity so dependent on gold, he creates vulnerability. What happens when gold prices fluctuate? When new sources are discovered? When trade routes shift? Musa's successors will face these questions without his strategic brilliance. Moreover, the Cairo incident reveals dangerous naivety. Musa apparently didn't understand basic supply-demand economics despite ruling a trading empire. His advisors either didn't know or didn't warn him about the consequences of flooding Cairo with gold. This suggests potential insularity in Mali's court, wealth so vast that it created disconnection from economic realities elsewhere. When Egyptian officials educate him about the crisis, Musa responds by borrowing gold at extortionate interest rates. essentially paying Cairo's moneylenders massive amounts to fix a problem he created. It's both admirable, taking responsibility, and concerning, the financial mismanagement that necessitated it. How much did this loan actually cost Mali's treasury? Contemporary sources don't specify, but if the interest rates were as high as suggested, the amount could have been staggering. As Musa ages, the question of succession looms. He rules for approximately 25 years after his Hajj, dying around 1337. Historical records about his final years remain frustratingly sparse. We know he continued building projects, maintained Mali's administrative systems, and expanded scholarship in Timbuktu. But the details of his decline remain mysterious. His son, Magan, inherits the throne but lacks his father's capabilities. Within a few years, the empire begins its slow decline. Magan rules briefly before his uncle Suleiman takes power. The dynasty continues, but never again does Mali reach the heights of Musa's reign. This highlights the fundamental problem with personality-driven governance. Musa's brilliance held the empire together, but he didn't create institutions strong enough to survive without his personal authority. The administrative systems, the cultural patronage, the diplomatic networks, all were extensions of Musa himself, rather than independent structures. In his final years, did Musa recognize these limitations? Did he understand that his spectacular Hajj, while achieving diplomatic and cultural objectives, also created expectations impossible to sustain? Did he grasp that tying Mali's prestige so completely to gold made the empire vulnerable to shifts in global trade patterns? We'll never know. What we do know is that Musa died having transformed Mali from a wealthy regional power into an empire whose fame echoed across 3 continents. Whether that transformation was sustainable is a different question, one his successors would answer through failure rather than success. Mansa Musa dies around 1337, leaving an empire transformed but vulnerable. His immediate successors struggled to maintain unity. The provinces he carefully controlled through economic leverage and personal authority begin drifting toward independence. By the late 14th century, Mali's power wanes as the Songhai Empire rises to challenge it. By the 15th century, Mali fragments, its wealth dispersed, its political cohesion shattered. But Musa's cultural legacy proves more durable than his political one. Timbuktu remains an intellectual center for centuries. The manuscripts survive, hundreds of thousands of them, preserved in libraries and private collections, testament to the scholarly tradition Musa funded. The buildings Es-Saheli designed endure, their distinctive architecture becoming synonymous with West African Islamic culture. So how do we evaluate Mansa Musa 7 centuries later? He defies simple categorization. He was undeniably brilliant, a ruler who understood that soft power through culture and education could achieve what military might couldn't sustain. He transformed Mali from a prosperous regional kingdom into an empire whose reputation reached every corner of the medieval world. He proved that African civilization matched or exceeded anything in Europe. Challenging racist narratives that would later justify colonialism. Yet he was also a slave owner on a massive scale, whose wealth derived partly from human trafficking. He demonstrated economic naivety that triggered international recession. He built an empire so dependent on his personal authority that it fragmented within decades of his death. Perhaps the most important lesson from Musa's story is this: wealth and power, no matter how spectacular, mean nothing without the institutional frameworks to sustain them. Musa's gold bought temporary glory. His investments in culture and learning created lasting legacy. But his failure to build political institutions strong enough to survive without him doomed the Mali Empire to eventual collapse. Musa's story resonates today in unexpected ways. His accidental triggering of economic crisis by flooding Cairo with gold mirrors, modern concerns about cryptocurrency volatility, or quantitative easing's inflationary potential. The same economic principles that he discovered through trial and error, that value depends on scarcity, that even gold becomes worthless in sufficient quantity, still govern our markets. His strategic use of cultural soft power predates modern public diplomacy by centuries. By sponsoring scholars, building magnificent structures, and performing spectacular public displays, Musa achieved what military conquest rarely can: forced acknowledgement of his civilization's sophistication and significance. Nation branding, we call it now. Musa mastered it in the 14th century. The moral complications surrounding his wealth remain painfully relevant. Can we celebrate technological innovations produced by exploitative labor practices? Can we admire cultural achievements built on economic inequality? Musa's legacy forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about how civilizations build greatness, often on foundations of suffering. History leaves us with tantalizing mysteries. How much gold did Musa actually control? Estimates vary wildly, from 400 billion to over 600 billion in modern terms, but these are educated guesses. The actual amount may have been even larger or smaller. We'll never know precisely. What happened to all that wealth? Mali's gold continued enriching its rulers for generations, but eventually the empire's gold fields either depleted or fell under others' control. Did Musa's lavish spending actually accelerate depletion? Or did shifting trade patterns simply redirect gold elsewhere? And the biggest question, what would have happened if Musa had understood basic economics before undertaking his Hajj? If he'd distributed his gold more carefully, avoiding the Cairo crisis, would Mali's international reputation have been even more formidable? Or was the spectacular display, economic chaos and all, necessary to achieve the recognition he sought? Here's what I want you to consider. Was Mansa Musa's greatest achievement his spectacular display of wealth, or was it proving that an African Muslim emperor could force the world to acknowledge his civilization's sophistication? Was his legacy the gold he spent, or the cultural institutions he built? And most importantly, if you possessed that much wealth and power, would you spend it on spectacular displays to ensure historical remembrance, or invest it in institutions designed to outlast your lifetime? The man who crashed economies with his generosity, who held more wealth than entire kingdoms, who transformed a pilgrimage into geopolitical theater. Mansa Musa's story challenges our assumptions about power, wealth, legacy, and what truly matters in the end. History remembers the gold. But maybe we should remember the libraries.